So we've had some technical gremlins, which I hope we've bashed away, but they might come back. You might need to bear with us. We'll see how we go. So I'm doing this last session differently. The other sessions that I've run have been me talking to PowerPoints, and I decided for this last session, the wrap-up session, I'm doing a formal lecture, which I hope will pull all the strands that we've been looking at together. So the title of this lecture then is Restaging Feminisms, Theatre and the Hard Road to Feminism's Renewal. So, the hard road to feminism's renewal is one I've been travelling since the Thatcherite 80s, as I said on our first day together. It's been an affectively charged feminist political journey, oscillating between hopeful expectation about feminism's future and fear at the potential loss of feminism as a socially progressive movement. And now it's not working. It decides when it's going to work. In the philosopher Spinoza's terms, this means oscillating between the hope in constant joy arising from the image of feminism whose outcome we doubt, and fear, the inconstant sadness arising from the image of feminism as a doubtful thing. As a feminist theatre academic travelling this long, hard road, I've been in the company of playwrights and practitioners whose work expressed similar hopes and fears, along with those theorists and critics writing towards the idea of feminism as a less doubtful thing. Feminist attachments inform what I've seen and read, and there's an emotional stickiness, to borrow feminist theorist Sarah Ahmed's term, that underpins such attachments, accounting for why some performances or critical texts stick more than others. The stickiness of Top Girls, masterpieces, Free Outgoing, or other shows that we've touched on in the course of this week. In short, I've been glued to those creative and critical works that move me to think of feminism's democratic designs, how they are resisted and what might render them a more certain, less doubtful thing. My monograph, Restaging Feminisms, is one chapter in this feminist theatre journey, one that's helped me to frame reflections for our past week together. And our sessions have followed in the footsteps of Restaging Feminisms as we have looked back to the past and forward to the present, histories and legacies, at all times keeping in mind the three feminisms, liberal, radical and socialist, that were foundational to pioneering feminist approaches to theatre. So gathering together for this final session, I'm offering one consolidating, summative glimpse back at restaging feminisms with two objectives in mind. Firstly, in the opening part, by exemplifying the conception, how I came to write Restaging Feminisms, what I'm aiming to do is to open up to some general reflections related to advice about the motivation, rationale, context, approach, and primary aim that a feminist project might entail. Now, of course, this is theatre related, but I hope there will be some reflections, nevertheless, which those of you working in other disciplines might find useful. In short, I hope this first part might provide some useful advice about the formulation of research projects, whatever feminist topic you're working on. And then in the second part, I'll come back to 3 performances that are analysed in the book, Restaging Feminisms, ones we haven't looked at so far, to summarise this critical strategy of re-evaluating the feminist theatre dynamics as explored on this course. This will in turn highlight the role of theatre in what I've described in these opening remarks as the hard road to feminism's renewal, a phrasing that's indebted to Stuart Hall's seminal 1988 collection of essays, The Hard Road to Renewal, Thatcherism and the Crisis of the Left. And there will be more about this later to amplify. So firstly, part 1 is behind the scenes about the conception of restaging feminisms. So I'm going to start with motivation. This is something we all need for research, motivation, a sustaining sense of and a deep commitment to an engagement with a specialist field of theatre study, or depending on which discipline you're in. In my own case, that motivation dates back to the pioneering years of feminism and theatre that I touched on in the introduction on day 1. At that time, as I explained before, there was so much that feminists gaining a toehold in theatre studies, myself included, were motivated to do and to change, challenging the blind spots in theatre history by recovering women's theatre hidden from view, transforming the male-dominated canon and curriculum, and exploring critical theoretical frameworks to evaluate theatre from feminist perspectives. And my feminist political motivation has endured across the decades as an ongoing engagement with the role of theatre in feminism's hard road to renewal. This is not least because, as my early mentor Janelle Reinhardt once put it, feminism is rather like a second skin which goes everywhere. That's not to say that a feminist skin always stays the same. Feminist struggles change over time. Aspirations and goals can shift, and in respect of feminist critical theory, concepts, ideas, or approaches are never at a standstill, but often adapt, change, transform. Nonetheless, for a feminist scholar, such shifts and changes are shaped by an underlying motivational aim. In Janelle Reinhardt's words, to practice political resistance to tradition, to dominance, to patriarchy. To engage in feminist cultural or social research is an act of resistance to an unequal righted status quo and expressive of a desire to change it. Feminist skins are yours. Don't lose them. So what I've touched on so far is motivation in the broader, more general sense. But then there's the question of a rationale for a particular project. Why propose this MA dissertation, PhD topic, this book, this article? In part, at least, a rationale, any rationale, will be influenced by context. In the case of restaging feminisms, this, for me, was the notable revival of feminism as a social movement in the UK, the emergence in the second decade of the 21st century of many grassroots feminist struggles, protests, or campaigns to a significant, high-profile degree, as touched on in our conversations yesterday. Theatre, too, evidenced something of a feminist renewal. More women playwrights breaking through the glass ceiling. Campaigns for gender equality in the theatre industry. Outings of sexual harassment in British theatre inspired by the global #MeToo movement, as we discussed in the Radical Feminist session. And there were also calls for an end to social class discrimination, as well as struggles to achieve cultural diversity on the British stage. In no decade since women's theatre came under attack in the Thatcherite 80s that informed Carol Churchill's Top Girls, had there been such a rich and varied outcrop of work, auguring and advocating feminist interests and perspectives. In contrast to leaner years, when with my feminist skin, I'd struggled to regularly find shows that I wanted to see, suddenly there was so much work to take in. So making this observation, I wanted to offer general reflection about how valuable I feel it is when conceiving a feminist theatre research project to think first about the performances that you're drawn to, the performances that stick, to practice thinking out of theatre first rather than theory. I feel this is fundamental to negating what otherwise is a risk of applying theory to theatre in reductive ways, as the means merely to uphold and reinforce theory's already knowing position, with theatre relegated to the task of mere exemplification. That point might have relevance too to other artistic fields. Giving primacy to theatre allows for theoretically derived knowledge to be opened up, surprised by the heterogeneous ways of seeing, imagining and knowing that theatre, through its mode of thinking through doing, embodies. Specifically in the case of restaging feminisms, the idea of re-evaluating the three feminisms and exploring their renewed relevance to the contemporary feminist movement and British stage came out of this heterogeneous mix of work I was seeing. Performances that cumulatively brought me to the realization of the various ways in which they embodied the muscle memory of the feminisms forged by the 70s women's movement. And alongside of this, I also began to register a shift in critical thinking about second wave feminism that had long been dismissed as outmoded, relegated to the past. And this, in combination with the feminist dynamics now circulating on the British stage, drew me to this idea of undertaking a similar endeavour in respect of feminism and theatre. The critical practice of looking back from past to present came to characterise my approach. So, why look back to the past and the feminist politics and theoretical thinking associated with it? Over the years, I've become aware that there's a dominant tendency to work with the new, the latest theory, as though this is de facto the best thing. And somewhat anecdotally, I remember back in the 1990s when Judith Butler became, everywhere. And I would have students coming to me, say, we've got to work with Butler. I want to do my PhD in theatre. Got to be Judith Butler. And then I say, okay, so what performances are you going to be looking at? And there'd be this big silence. See the point? It's like, no, you're a theatre person, you're not a philosopher, and you're not Judith Butler, sorry. But, you've got to think first, and then you work with Butler. And I did get to the point, I thought, if somebody else comes and tells me they're going to do a PhD on Judith Butler, I'm resigning. Anyway, but as Michelle Barrett and Anne Phillips argue in their introduction to Destabilising Theory, we need to resist assuming that later theory is therefore better theory, and that the best theory of all is the position from which we happen at the moment to be speaking. So in the interests of a balanced view, they go on to state we should also resist the strong view from the other side, which argues that nothing new is ever said, and that what may look like a paradigm shift is in the end no more than recycling of old debates and new terms. Now, neither of these two positions, they conclude, is satisfactory, and nor am I trying to claim that the old debates are the best debates to engage in. Rather, what I'm advising is it can be useful to move laterally across different stages of critical and theoretical thinking. In terms of feminist thinking, it can prove useful, as I hope this week has demonstrated, to look back at influential points of feminism and feminist theatre thinking in order to help understand the current state of play and to move forward. And in this regard, Sue Ellen Case's advocacy of theory not to be in a transcendent position, but to be used by feminists for the politics of the moment, adapted by them, and repeatedly altered or forsaken in different historical and political situations is relevant. In other words, we can pick up, adapt, go back to, or let go of theory according to shifting political needs and contexts. To repeatedly look forward to a new theory is to overlook the politicizing possibilities of looking back, where crucially looking back is not to see in the same old ways, but to revisit and review in order to see otherwise. So this was, in brief, the strategy I determined on and adopted for restaging feminisms, thereby consolidating my primary research question or defining aim that would drive the project, to understand how, in the context of British theatre, representations of the three feminisms that we've been looking at might connect the past to present political and critical practices. To go back and forth between feminisms and theatre, past and present, has its challenges. There's so much ground to cover moving between past and present. Indeed, I confess, a criticism at the book proposal stage for restaging feminisms was, can Elaine really do this in 40,000 words? But as with any project you undertake, there inevitably needs to be a level of refinement with regard to how you scope out and support your research aims or questions. A broad knowledge of the field you're studying is necessary, as evidenced, for instance, in the way that PhDs often require a literature survey, at least as an orientation task, if not in the final write-up. But out of that comes a more selectively resourced approach. We always have to make our choices, and the important thing is to account for and defend the selections we make. So in my case, one strategy was to put each performance studied, and there were 6 in all, 2 for each of the 3 feminisms, in a kind of conversation with a relevant piece of feminist literature that served as a critical touchstone for the feminism under discussion. And just 2 more related bits of advice about what I'm calling critical touchstones. Firstly, if you're working on performance from an historical period, don't be afraid to go back to the related critical literature of that period. Remember in the Churchill session, I went back to Juliet Mitchell. I didn't kind of stay with what have we got now. I went back and I reread and rethought. So don't be afraid to do that if you're doing something historical. Do have a look at the literature that's around at the time if you're looking at past performance. And secondly, about critical touchstones, and this is one that I always said to my own PhD students, is find your Bible. And by that, I meant any book, article, or essay, whatever it was, something that comes closest to the project that you have in mind. And not because you want to copy whatever the author is that's authored your Bible, but because it's closest to what you're trying to do. Because when you're particularly engaged with PhDs, it's long projects over years, sometimes you can't see the feminist woods for the trees, or is it the other way around? I forget. But you need an anchor. So when it's in a stressful period, suddenly you go back and you can read it and think, yes, that's what I'm aiming for. That's what I'm aiming for. So I used to say, call it little Bible, whatever it is, can be essay, article, book, anything, but have something as an anchor. It really helps. So going back to restaging feminisms, a further strategy I adopted there was, to make my choices and defend them, was I went for a cluster of Gramscian-informed theorists. Hence, I was using Stuart Hall, I started with, Chantal Mouffe, and Angela McRobbie as critical to the study. So that's why I was able to defend an account for my choices. They all have shared but differing insights related to an underlying unifying notion of feminism in all its dynamics as constitutive of a counter-hegemonic project whose struggles against patriarchalism and neoliberalism have to be fought on many fronts and in many kinds of theatre. And Chantal Mouffe in particular, her concept chain of equivalence among the manifold struggles against subordination was conceptually and structurally valuable for putting the study together. It assisted me in going back to and prizing my former modelling of theatre and a feminist network of resistance so that I thereby could find a way of modelling the three feminisms as a chain of resistance in which the performances appear as links staging different facets of feminist struggle. So to sum up this point, the key thing here, the overarching thing is, ask yourselves, who's in my feminist genealogy? You can't cover everybody, so think, who are the feminist kin that you need to include in a specific project? And one last reflection in this first part, and this concerns performance analysis, so it is particular to theatre studies. So performance analysis very much evolved out of semiotics, which we touched on in the week, this possibility of understanding theatre as a sign system, which shifted attention away from what theatre means to how meaning is made through theatre's multiple intersecting signifying languages. But now we also have recourse to understandings of affect, something that wasn't in the critical toolbox back in the earlier years. Performance can now readily draw on both the how of meaning making and affective technologies in any given show that press upon us an idea, an image, or an action in a process of intellectual and felt affective understanding. So both cognition and feeling. So feminist understanding, feminist feeling. And those moments in a performance that leave a lasting impression are also often those from which to begin to structure analysis and discussion of a show. So to underscore this point, in my most recent work on Churchill that I referred to yesterday, I found myself going back to an observation made by the director Peter Brook, one that kind of was sort of in the back of my mind and sort of haunting over the years, but I'd never really taken it up before as a springboard for performance analysis. And it was this comment by Brook where he's asking whether theatre had the capacity to leave its, what he called its mark. And he argues, this is back in 1972, in the case of a striking theatrical experience, then it's the play's central image that remains, a kernel engraved on a spectator's memory. So from a feminist perspective, this entails asking, what's the play's central feminist image that remains? What's the feminist political kernel engraved on our memory of a show? And you could even ask that of the readings we've done in this week, not plays that you've seen, but plays that you've read. And even through a reading, what are the kind of the image, what's the key image that lingers? You know, and if I were just doing a kind of analysis that was based on the reading of a text, not necessarily having to see it, I'd still start there. I'd still start with the image, that kernel of the image, that central image that's impacted on me the most, and start the analysis from there. I'd also recommend looking at Chantal Mouffe's reflections on the arts and their capacity and means to produce what she identifies as ideas with the power to affect. And it was Chantal Mouffe that sent me back to Spinoza on affects and ideas as headlined in my opening remarks. And just one tip there, if you're reading one critic's work that's important, and that critic refers to another one that you find interesting and want to work with, go back to the original. Never settle for a second-hand account. So when I was reading about Spinoza's ideas via Mouffe, I then spent a summer going back to Spinoza and wrestling with Spinoza. God help me. But it's not enough. You always with PhD, you have to go back to the original source if it's something you find you're really going to work with. Never take it second-hand. So, summing this point up, affectively rendered feminist ideas with the power to affect and potentially elicit identification with feminism can often be those that guide our performance analysis. So here we can now move on to the second part of the talk. Just, excuse me 1 second. It's the interval. Okay, so part 2 then. So in revisiting the feminist dynamics theatre, the 3 performances I'm going to touch on are Laura Wade's Home, I'm Darling, David Gregg's version of The Suppliant Women, and Townsend Theatre's We Are the Lions, Mr. Manager. In the monograph, Restaging Feminisms, Home, I'm Darling is analysed in relation to liberal feminism, suppliant women in the context of radical feminist dynamics, and We Are the Lions in the socialist feminist chapter. My critical touchstone for this part of the lecture on revisiting feminisms, as circulated throughout the week, is Hall's essay collection, The Hard Road to Renewal. So that's my critical touchstone for now. And an idea that has stuck with me over the years is Hall's recognition that for the left to think its way out of the crisis it found itself in during the Thatcherite years, it had to realign, rethink, regroup in ways that took account of feminism as a social movement, rather than, as he put it, only nodding opportunistically in feminism's direction. In brief, arguing in Gramscian terms for a war of position conducted on many fronts at once, he was clear that for the left to become hegemonic, it must recognise the interconnectedness of social struggles, and that includes rather than excludes feminism. Again, we've talked a lot in the week about those antagonisms between feminism and socialism, haven't we? So going back to Hall, before, during and since Restaging Feminisms, has repeatedly returned me to his observations on political imagery as a matter of ideology and representation. This persuasive argument that it's increasingly the case that policies don't capture people's political imaginations unless constructed into an image with which they can identify. His concern over the media as a source of disinformation and the game of what he calls impression management. And if we think again about the media, social media, and that issue of disinformation, fake information now has become really escalated as an issue. And impression management has escalated in the nationalist and racist rhetoric of the right in the UK and elsewhere. I mean, I've only got to mention the dreaded word Brexit, the UK's disastrous exit from the European Union, to give an example of that escalation. So counter-hegemonic imaging and imagining is urgently needed to press upon managed imaginations and to persuade of an alternative socially progressive vision, that it's still possible. And if we accept the argument that art, theatre, is able to mobilize feeling, seeing strategies, or as Mouffe argues, has the capacity to make us see things in a different way, potentially, it can create affectively realized identifications with the left that the right-wing impression management has fought so fiercely to repress. No stranger to impression management over the years, feminism, as we've noted, I think, through the week, has been routinely subjected to backlash treatments by the right and the left. The latter not least because, as Hall observed, the culture of patriarchalism is nowhere so deeply embedded as within the left itself. So again, this is the issue of antagonisms between socialism and feminism that we talked about yesterday. The feminist imagery deployed in all three performances contests patriarchal forms of masculinity, albeit within different feminist dynamics. By no means the only feminist concern raised in these performances, the need to disarticulate what Hall termed the masculine conception of the world remains important to feminisms today, as highlighted throughout these 5 days. Revisiting the shows, I'm not trying to give you detailed commentaries, but I'm pinpointing moments of feminist imagery, paying attention to their affective rendering, the affective charge, the stickiness of the image making that augurs a capacity to capture the political imagination of those who potentially see them, thereby possibly creating points of new or renewed modes of feminist identification. If nothing else, I hope that this part communicates a sense to you of why these performances got under my feminist skin, driving me towards the conception of the monograph. So first up then is Wade's Home, I'm Darling. Why should you have to do this elaborate dance around my embattled masculinity? That's a question that Johnny puts to his wife, Judy, in the final showdown between the couple in Laura Wade's comedy, Home, I'm Darling, that opened in 2018 as a co-production between London's National Theatre and the Welsh Theatre Clwyd, a production that went on to transfer to the Duke of York's in the West End. We are once again back in that Ibsenite doll's house territory that we looked at, but with a significant twist. It's actually Judy, the wife, who problematically has constructed her husband's embattled masculinity through her retro-fueled attachment to fashioning her life in the image of a 50s-style domestic goddess, which means Johnny must occupy the position of patriarchal sole breadwinner. It's a drama in which Wade's feminist terrain is woven through tactical inversions or reversals, a kind of playful inversion of the liberal feminist call in Betty Friedan's Feminine Mystique for women to become career-focused rather than home-centred, a reversal of gender stereotypes, as it's the husband rather than the wife who raises objections to patriarchy. So in this feminist landscape of Wade's, there are two images that I want to bring into focus. The first involves Wade's disarticulation of choice feminism, her dismantling of feminism's neoliberal top girl double that's displaced feminism's socially progressive vocabulary with a neoliberal lexicon of self-empowerment and freedom. I get to choose, insists Judy. This is what I've chosen. And this, by her choosing, is the overturning of the liberal feminism that we were looking at to begin with. So let's see. I'm really hoping YouTube is going to come direct. We'll see. Whoa, we'll be a first.
Judy's the perfect housewife. Always looking for little things to brighten Johnny's day. She keeps his home sparkling and his slippers toasty.
Can you come down and sort of, we had it set up to come on. Can you sort it out, please? To get it to come on the screen. We set it up so it would come direct. We spent 20 minutes trying to get it to...
And after all that, now we have to go back.
Because it's to do with that, you know, the button where it says duplicate, but I don't know how to get it. Duplicate screen, do you know how to get that up?
Do you know how he did it?
Is if you can get that.
Then it works a bit. So yeah, I think I'll just do what we've been doing. Okay, now I should come. Yeah, and you have to go online for the thing.
If you press escape like on the slideshow and then click the link, then it will automatically.
Okay.
It's on the full slideshow.
That it's not okay. 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 Oh, now it's all gone.
Let's try going in.
Okay.
I'll try.
Just open the slide. Just open the
No,
slide.
now she has it all copied.
I'm trying to.
So it's in your slideshow only when if you press like get out of the slideshow mode.
Yeah.
But we spent 20 minutes.
It's been happening so many times. Yeah.
Where does it go down? Keep going down.
It's happening.
There. Okay. So what do we do? How did you do it?
Yeah. So you just because it's in the slideshow mode.
Judy's the perfect housewife.
Bring me a drink. Always looking.
Yeah. Can I get my notebook?
Get your notebook, because it's about 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to get some technical support here, because there's about 3 clips coming up, and I don't want every time for this to happen. It's too tedious.
Judy's the perfect housewife. Bring me a drink. Always looking for little ways to brighten Johnny's day. She keeps his home sparkling and his slippers toasty. When he comes home from a hard day's work, she's there with a cheeky cocktail and a delicious dinner. But is their perfect life a perfect lie? Home I'm Darling. Book now.
Okay. I think I want to go back into it. I need to close this off, right? Whew. Slideshow from current slide. Right. So. This is what a feminist looks like, questions Judy's mother, who hails from the second wave feminist generation. Wearing a frilly apron and dancing around with a duster in a gingham paradise isn't feminism, she contests. You've made a luxury choice. Don't pretend it's political. Whether mother-daughter debate reflects the generational divides and divisions that have hampered feminism's progress over the decades, it's the moving in both senses, image of Judy, played by the actress Catherine Parkinson, whom you've seen here, trapped in these dresses that swirl and swish and take up so much room that she can barely negotiate the kitchen or allow anyone to get close to her, that renders her choice feminism absurd and ridiculous. We're given to understand that it's the inequalities and the time-stealing pressures of the neoliberal workplace that drove Judy back into a 50s patriarchal setup. And I suspect that most of us, if not all of us, in this room can appreciate the desire to retreat from those pressures, and that the longing or desire for an alternative among us is something I might safely assume. What Wade finally offers, and here I come to my second point, is a utopian image. A wordless choreography between husband and wife in the kitchen, now sharing domesticity and both getting ready to leave the house for the office. It's utopian since we are far from a reality of shared domestic and work-based labour that was, if you recollect, an aspiration of socialist feminism. As a utopian feminist image, it registers a longing for that which is not yet, a longing temporarily assuaged by the dramatic fiction that renders the idea of shared labour as if present. Spinoza reminds us that affect intensifies in relation to the image of a present thing, a reminder that in a parallel way assists with understanding the affective charge of Wade's feminist imagery, the potential joy of seeing the co-labour scenario as if a present thing. Equally, however, mixed feelings of inconstant joy may well accompany this image of a future whose outcome we doubt, and inconstant sadness as the image appears a doubtful thing. Hope and fear oscillate in my second performance example from the Radical Feminist chapter. This is The Suppliant Women, a new version of Aeschylus's tragedy by the Scottish playwright David Gregg, the tragedy in which the Greek city of Argos deliberates whether to grant asylum to 50 young women fleeing from enforced marriage and the threat of male violence in the East, when to grant sanctuary will be to invite war on the city. What was exceptional about this performance was the chorus made up of young women from each city that the production toured to. And this next clip shows you the making of that chorus of the young women and something about behind the scenes so you get a feel for the production.
Which name?
It's this one, yeah. Brilliant. Yes. And we're just...
When the taking in of refugees is the morally correct thing to do, and yet it might bring war to your city, what is the correct course of action?
Athens, 2,500 years ago, had been dealing with a wave of immigration from the East. And actually, when you go through history, you realize that immigration is just a constant thing. I mean, we're restless creatures.
I think it's essentially about rights. It's looking at the nature of rights, competing rights, and it focuses on two rights in particular: asylum seekers and women.
And it's about a group of women who escape a forced marriage, get on a boat, cross the Mediterranean, land in Greece and claim asylum.
It's a piece of theatrical archaeology. It's an incredibly old play, and we've decided that the way we want to approach it is to try and understand it as it would have been understood in its place and time.
If you were to pick it up and read it in a newspaper now or in a programme now, you'd think, oh, Aeschylus, this guy from... So when was he born, 1985? Or he writes so topically about exactly what's going on, the types of politics, the morals, the identity crises, women's power, democracy. It's unbelievably relevant.
3 years ago I did this play with David Gregg called The Events, which involved a choir and 2 actors. And about halfway through the rehearsals I suddenly thought, oh my god, this is like an ancient Greek play. And then I spent quite a lot of time trying to find an ancient Greek play to do in the same way. In other words, with a community chorus and professional actors. And The Suppliant Women is never done because the chorus are the protagonists. They are the lead actors. So when I came across it, I thought, wow, this is the play for us to do.
There's a lot of contemporary practice which brings together professional arts and community arts, but the Greeks invented this. This is how the original was done. There was a community chorus and there was a couple of professional actors.
The fact of having people from the community talk about a play which is about identity and politics and democracy is irreplaceable. It's priceless.
Watching theatre is really important. It's a central part of what a theatre does. But making theatre can be equally transformative for the people who do it. And the wider the pool of opportunity to make theatre that we can give, whether it's through our youth theatre or through other participatory events or the chorus of the Suppliant Women, the more that the Lyceum can be engaged with the people of this city.
It's like a lot of the girls, we were selected specifically because we didn't have any previous acting, singing, dancing experience. So just the confidence to know that this is something that you can achieve if you put your mind to it.
Theatre works best when you have a city talking to itself. And so if you have a community chorus drawn from that city, you've really plumbed the people of the city into the show.
I love the play, I love the writing, I love the music.
The aulos, the ancient musical instrument that will be heard for the first time in 2,500 years on our stage for this production, sounds so haunting and so beautiful and so strange.
Having music and movement immediately lifts us all to another plane. We become bonded, it's communal, it's collective, and it's all the things that theatre in its core really is.
So it's very, very vital, it's very vibrant, vigorous, rigorous, and it's that particular dimension that I'm most excited by.
Greek Mamma Mia, I don't know, I stole that off Ramin.
It's not bringing something in that's new, it's going back to the core of how we are together as humans.
Current slide. Thank you. So that gives you a little bit of an insight. And there are 3 points I want to make in relation to this production that are relevant to the discussion in hand. Now, the first is to note how, by the time the Suppliant Women reached London, which was in the November of 2018, it was caught up in the Me Too movement that we were talking about in the radical feminism session, because it shows director Ramin Gray, who you heard in the clip, was called to account for sexual harassment. Actually, not in relation to this production, which I would, well, it would be ultra distressing to think in relation to this production with all the communities of women involved. That's not to agree with the historic. Okay, so do you see what I mean? Like, it would have felt even worse. But because of that, it got caught up in the Me Too discussions. And that makes it a prime example of how theatre can intersect with other cultural circuits and activities producing counter-hegemonic knowledge. In this instance, how a production with its protest-like objection to male violence against women is framed by and linked to the global protest against sexual harassment, thereby generating further public debate. And there was a lot of debate in the press about this show because of the outing of the sexual harassment. Secondly, I wanted to observe that in terms of the hard road to feminism's renewal, and the need to disarticulate feminism in its neoliberal guise, as previously headlined, then the chorus of radical feminist protests within and around the play that reverberates with the post-Weinstein protests against the abuses of male power and domination does suggest renewed attachments to radical feminism. except we should note that the identification is more with the naming and shaming of patriarchy rather than the naming of radical feminism as such, given what we discussed about the negative stereotyping of this feminist strand. In the suppliants, you can feel the antagonism towards patriarchalism in the tension between the revival of a canonical text that marks centuries of patriarchal oppression and the contemporary choruses of young women drawn from cities around Britain who perform and protest it. Reviews of the production, particularly those relating to its arrival in London, on the one hand acknowledge the affectively charged demand for an end to patriarchal oppression voiced by the chorus, and on the other express concern that it merely restated a problem without solving it. But I think this performance offers a signal as to what might be involved in seeking an end to patriarchal oppression, and this is my third point. Unlike Laura Wade's utopian gesture, that images how things might be otherwise on the domestic and work front between men and women, but doesn't detail how to get there, the performance of the suppliant women shows the women's protest as calling on the state as vital to support their collective stand against patriarchy. They need the city to stand with them in solidarity, to, as they put it to the King of Argos, to stand up for women, to stand against rape. And in the way it was staged, from the set design that denoted the outdoor public space of the Agora, to the occupation of the stage by the chorus, their affectively realized choreographies of collected feet stamping, hand clapping, archaic cries of anger, the performance was highly evocative of the movement of the squares, as evidenced in the Arab Spring. Yet crucially, the moving image of a popular protest-like demonstration on the part of the young women, combined with their petitioning of the state to deepen democracy by standing against male violence. In other words, for justice to be done, for their petition to be heard and acted upon, involved popular protest and political and legal processes to sanction and outlaw male violence against women. Not then a withdrawal from the state, but engagement with the state to democratize. Nonetheless, there's an obstacle, if not a flaw, to my argument here, given that to heed the women's call for the undoing of the masculine conception of the world significantly depends on the workings of a socially progressive democracy, which of course is something absent from the UK's persistent neoliberal patriarchal regime. As Chantal Mouffe puts it, nowadays, before being able to radicalise democracy, it's first necessary to recover it. Recovering a feeling for democracy and action characterizes my third and final example of a socialist feminist inflected performance, We Are the Lions, Mr. Manager, written by Neil Gore for Townsend Theatre Productions. And this show presents the 2-year Grunwick strike, 1976-8, by Asian women workers, its charismatic leader, Diaman Desai, and her co-strikers, who were dubbed by the press as the strikers in saris. It's a two-hander, Madhavi Patel playing Desai and Gore role-playing the multiple male figures involved in the strike, adversaries and supporters. It's a participatory performance, at times casting the audience as part of the protesting body, either within the auditorium or up on stage. Composed as an episodic montage of scenes that follow the timeline of the strike, the show's use of Brechtian techniques, comedy, or live music reflects a reprise of the 70s popular political theatre tradition. And in particular, one technique of this show was to draw heavily on documentary footage, which was interwoven with the live action. And hopefully we can, this is a very quick clip. There's only one more clip after this. Footage that they would have been using in the show. So, firstly, this representation of the strike spearheaded by Desai, who is often overlooked or hidden from histories, feminist or otherwise, attests to a cultural resistance against what Angela McRobbie identifies as the neoliberal move against those countercultural resources that might support the creation of new radical imaginaries. When important moments of historical struggle like this for liberation are foreclosed, erased from cultural memory, no longer transmissible, then this heightens the risk to democratic futures. It closes down imaginaries, McRobbie explains, that are a resource, a source of hope, a space that offers vocabularies, concepts, histories, narratives, and experiences which can help illuminate the predicament or powerlessness, help to find ways of overcoming such circumstances. So by historicizing, reimagining, reimaging the strike, what this performance recovers is, to borrow from Stuart Hall, the moment of the inception of the great moving right show and the emergence of the crisis of the left. In the view of several strikers and subsequent commentators, it's a strike that could have been won. But as Amrit Wilson explains, its ultimate defeat was due to the state, trade union leadership, and Grundtvig bosses colluding against its success because they recognized a potentially revolutionary situation developing. If this performance assists with present circumstances, then it's because by means of its affectively rendered popular political formation, it captures a feeling of that revolutionary situation as it demonstrates in the Brechtian sense the conditions that characterizes it, the us and them political frontier between the striking workers and the bosses, police and state, the chain of equivalence forged as the women's struggle garnered support from workers in other sectors. In making this past feminist socialist struggle present, imagining it in the here and now space of performance, We Are the Lions invites connections between the then great moving right show and the crisis of the left and where we are now, the crisis of neoliberalism and the elusive yet enduring possibility of the great moving left show. Not then a nostalgic longing for the past, but a present longing for the recovery and deepening of democracy. The Grundtvig strike has now left its mark on Dollis Hill, where the strike took place, which is in London, but way out on the outskirts and the poorer outskirts of London. This is fantastic mural now marking the strike, across this bridge. And there's another one as you come out the tube station immediately, little kind of corner shop, and then there's another fantastic mural. So it is marking that geographical space. And also, as just one last clip, because Townsend Theatre are set to revive the show to mark the 50th anniversary of the strike. So this is the last clip, I promise. But I thought we could look at it. They put up a crowdfunder, so I'm not asking you to be part of the crowdfunding, but because it's got some footage of the production and some little commentary about it. Okay, so ignore the crowdfunding bit. Oh, verifying you're human. Success! We are human.
Townsend Theatre Productions are crowdfunding for our new show, We Are the Lions, Mr. Manager. We are delighted that Jatinda Verma is one of our partners for the project.
Next year marks the 50th anniversary of one of the most remarkable episodes in modern British history, when a diminutive Asian woman stood up against her bosses and unleashed changes in industrial relations that remain in force till today.
Hey sister, where you going? In the middle of the night, I'm going down to London, to the bloody Grunwick site, where a wee small band of immigrants are fighting for their rights. So put your coat on, Jimmy lad, and come and join the fight. Hold the line, hold the line. We'll be there before the dawn to hold the picket line.
Right! What you are running is not a factory, it is a zoo. But in a zoo there are many types of animals, Mr. Manager. Some are monkeys that will dance on your fingertips. Others are lions that will bite your head off. We are the lions, Mr. Manager.
Mrs. Jayabane Desai's cry, "We are the lions, Mr. Manager," is the subject and title of Townsend Theatre Productions' remarkable play about this iconic moment in British history.
We want union recognition in the company, basic. But now they are sacking all the people who are coming out to join us. So another basic would be reinstatement, no?
We need your help in this crowdfunding campaign to ensure that as many people as possible see this play and at affordable prices.
Any contribution you make will be a great help and will be matched by other funders. There's also rewards for different levels of contribution, free tickets, free CDs, signed posters, time in rehearsal. There's exhibition and programme credits. The show will be out in autumn 2025 and we look forward to seeing you on the tour.
We'll be there before the dawn to hold the picket line.
So, from a feminist perspective, any moving left show must recognise and redress the masculine conception of the world as demonstrated in each of these three performances. Moreover, all of these performances exemplify how theatre can play its part by opening up space for new or renewed radical imaginaries, show the potential it has for spectators to see the world differently. For while theatre doesn't change the world, it can change how we see it. And seeing differently can occur when our affective response to what we see produces... it doesn't want to play again, come on. Produces what Beverly Best describes as a shift in the way one perceives, that in turn produces a shift in the way one experiences and lives in the world, a process she terms the dialectical shock of recognition. The affective response a spectator might have to the disarticulation of feminism in its neoliberal guise that Wade represents through the absurd figure of the housewife by choice, or to the affectively charged work of the chorus of young women in the supplants chanting equal power to all women, or to the revolutionary pulse of We Are the Lions, Mr. Manager, augurs the possibility of a dialectical shock of recognition. In short, if the feminist political images, imagining of the desperate housewife petitioning suppliants or the strikers in saris press upon the imagination of spectators, leave an impression that any consequent shift in the experience of the world might entail a longing for a renewed and radicalized democracy that is not yet, but still yet might be. So, to conclude, in these post-pandemic years, I have to confess I feel less hopeful, more fearful for the future of feminist theatre. Note that in feminist theatre then and now that we looked at on day one, I draw attention to the survey from the Guardian newspaper that during the pandemic revealed that more than 60% of women across all roles in UK theatre were considering leaving the industry, with 85% worried gender inequality would worsen after COVID. And those worries about gender disparity have been confirmed. The post-pandemic trend is one that's moving towards smaller, solo or duo casts, safe box office revivals, and increased financial hardship for freelancers, many of whom are women. All of this has rendered the situation for women theatre makers far more precarious. So in this climate, any next new chapter on theatre and feminism's hard road to renewal will look very different. And yet, it is a road to keep on walking, always in the company of playwrights and practitioners, theorists and critics whose resistant counter-hegemonic leanings aspire to render a feminist democratic future a more certain, less doubtful thing. Okay, you can. So I've taken more time with this because I wanted it to achieve these two objectives: the advice and something that wraps up all that we've been looking at in this week. So I think we could just take a few minutes in case there are any immediate questions, and then we'll move for tea and on to the round table. Anything immediate, or people might just want to go, oof, need to take that in and have tea.
Actually, a very quick clarification. It's not a question, Elaine. That in the we are the. It's a quick clarification actually that in We Are the Lions production, is it something which goes into a kind of a bit of more exploration of who Jayaben Desai was, because the kind of there's a particular kind of immigration history behind that women in sari, and immediately you think about, oh my God, the disempowered South Asian woman. But that route is through Kenya, and
yes.
So there's a much more complexity in kind of fronting her as the striker in.
Yeah,
sari.
I mean the striker is predominant, but yes, they do include some autobiographical episodes that tells the history of how she ends up in the UK, and that it particularly marks the kind of issue of coming from one class and then having to enter this low, exactly that. So they don't do so many of those episodes of the personal backstory, but they are there. But it's the striking that they keep to the fore, but they have put that in.
I just had a doubt in terms of the suppliant woman, the staging of that play. Was there ever a response from any of the cast members, like the women, to Raman Gray's Me Too situation? Like, did they ever say that we do not want to perform, or was there like?
I didn't find any.
Okay.
At the time, I was looking out for that. I mean, I did. I remember I came across, but this is the opposite actually of what you're inquiring about. I came across accounts where the women, the young women in the choruses talked about the kind of solidarity that they formed between themselves. Things like helping each other, going home together after show, making sure no woman was on her own, things like that. But I didn't find any reference to the sexual harassment case. Like they didn't protest that to the best of my knowledge.
Okay.
Here, use this one.
So my question was around the affect and the sort of the stickiness, the attachment that it formed. Regarding, like you said, there were a lot of plays that came around critiquing choice feminism and sort of things. So what kind of affects usually sort of surfaced in these plays that would sort of try to get attachments of feminist or yeah.
Okay, so that I think to answer that, it comes back to Brooke's point about a central image, that when you're trying to critique liberal feminism in its choice feminist incarnation, which is the opposite of what it started out as, there will often be some kind of, you know, like Brooke would say, like central image that really gets that. It's affectively rendered. So do you remember I showed you the slide from Penelope Skinner's Linda, and it had the actress there in this breakdown. And, you know, there was a moment there because she always had a wig before, and there's this kind of moment where the wig comes off and her whole body caves in. And that, for me, is the image I would retain, because it's the one where if you buy into these beauty industries and you think you can kind of manage that and you think you can be Superwoman, actually, no, the whole thing cracks and fractures. So that would, do you see what I mean? There's usually something in the image making that has that strong critical edge, that takeaway critical edge, which is, so, I mean, shows will use very different kinds of affective technologies, but I do stand by, that feeling. If you can find those, it's the kernel, the way to open up the analysis. I highly recommend it. Does that help, giving the example from Linda, yeah? Any last, right, a last one, Komita? And then we'll have some tea, I think.
Hello.
No, I just wanted to, in continuation what Nisha has asked, that in the last production that you have shown, We Are the Lions, Mr. Manager, how does the audience participation enhances the notion of that affect? Like, what does it do? What are the moments that then get stuck in one's mind, if you have any examples?
Yeah, a whole range in that show, actually, because they really do go for that popular political theatre tradition. So it's a kind of, at times it's also, if I say like almost like pantomime, that sounds derogatory, but they kind of send up the police, the agents of the state, in a pantomimic way, which are invited to laugh at. They get audience people up on stage as protecting. The minute you do that, you always get a sense of laughter comes in, because you're getting people up that aren't performers, and then they're required to perform. All of that kind of participation. But at the same time, I think for me the most moving, so they're the fun part, and they want the fun part to be, they want to entertain politics. It's back to, it can't be a pamphlet. that we had in the manifesto yesterday. It's got to entertain. But at the same time, I think the most moving moments they created, the most affective, are ones where the live action on stage works with the documentary footage. Because when you have clips in the documentary footage, you have got that sense of the past in relation to the live playing. And there's something about, I mean, I often, when I'm thinking about this play, come back to looking at the footage online, and there's more than I've shown you. And I always get goosebumps just watching that documentary footage. So you put that together with the actors on stage, and there are those moments when they're playing with it and against it that give you the same kind of goosebumps. And one other thing, because there's only 2 of them, and the actress playing Desai, stays with that role, and Gore has to play all these others. It's really labor intensive, because they're changing all the props, they're moving the action on, minimally set, but they've got to kind of keep creating the different sets around. And they were extraordinary. The guy was absolutely sweated labor. And there's something moving about that live experience and the labour that goes into making that show. And it sort of connects with the sense of labour that protesting takes too. Theatre and activism, the labour it takes. That's also highly affective when you're in that moment of feeling it. Okay, are there housekeeping things before tea? Yes? I thought so. Okay.